Hi everyone, I'm attorney Aiden Durham with 180 Law Co. in Colorado, and you're watching All Up in Your Business. On this episode of All Up in Your Business, I'm going to talk about EINs, otherwise known as Employer Identification Numbers or Tax ID numbers. Does your business need one? If it doesn't need one, should it have one anyway? How do you get one? What happens if your business changes? Do you need to get a new one? All that fun stuff. But first, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, and check the description for links to additional information and resources. I'm also going to do a special members only video to complement this video. So check that out by going to the memberships tab on my channel page and become a member if you want access to that extra content. All right, so EINs. As I mentioned, EIN stands for Employer Identification Number. It's also sometimes referred to as a federal tax ID number. Simply put, the EIN is kind of like a social security number for your business. The name is a little misleading. When you hear Employer Identification Number, you may think, okay, this is only needed if I have employees. And while, yeah, that is kind of true, there are a lot of instances where you may still need an EIN even if you do not have employees. If you operate your business as a sole proprietorship, either under your own name or under a DBA or trade name, and you don't have employees, then you don't need an EIN. You can just use your own social security number in that instance. This applies even if you operate multiple businesses under multiple DBAs. You can still use your social security number for all of them. You still can get an EIN as a sole proprietor, but you don't really need one. For the most part, you only need an EIN as a sole proprietor if you have employees. If you operate your business as a single member LLC and you're taxed as a sole proprietorship, meaning you haven't elected to be taxed as a C Corp or S Corp, then you don't need an EIN. Same goes for if you convert your sole proprietorship or DBA into a single member LLC. You won't need an EIN. I say you don't need one because legally you don't need one. The IRS doesn't require that you have one in that instance. But most banks are going to require that you have an EIN if you want to open a business bank account. And since the first rule of LLC ownership is keeping things separate, having a separate bank account for your business, then in that sense, you do actually kind of need an EIN. And again, going back to the whole separateness thing, and you and your business are not one and the same, I think it's just kind of good business practice in general to have an EIN for your single member LLC, even if it's not required. You know, it's just one more little thing that you can do to separate yourself from the business. If you operate your business as a partnership, multiple member LLC, corporation, or if your single member LLC elects to be taxed as a corporation, then in that case, you do need an EIN. You will apply for an EIN through the IRS, and it is free to do so. The IRS doesn't charge a fee for getting an EIN. This is important because if you Google something like EIN application, you may find websites that look like they're the IRS or the right application. Ignore all of those. You want to be on irs.gov. Any other website that purports to be the EIN application is either a scam or some kind of filing or business formation service, which that's totally fine if you want to pay a service or professional such as a lawyer or an accountant to apply for the EIN on your behalf. But if it's free and it's not on irs.gov, then it's probably a scam trying to get your personal information so they can steal your identity or do something else really bad with your info. So you can go to irs.gov and type EIN into the search bar to find the online application. I've also linked directly to the online application down in the description so you can check that out as well. The online EIN application will ask you some questions about you and your business. It's fairly straightforward for the most part. Then once you submit the application, in most cases, It will be accepted right away, and you'll get a copy of the EIN confirmation letter right then and there. Save this letter immediately. The IRS isn't going to email a copy of it to you or anything like that. This is your only opportunity to save that letter. If you close out your web browser and haven't saved the document, then you'll need to call the IRS to get that information again, which usually means waiting on hold for at least an hour or some other ridiculous amount of time. Or you can submit the application via mail or fax. The form that you'll use is called Form SS4. Applying online through the IRS's online application is the easiest and quickest way to get the EIN though. But sometimes we'll need to use the paper application anyway. Occasionally, if you've gone through the online application and you hit that submit button at the end, you'll sometimes land on a screen telling you that there has been some kind of error. It will give you an error code and tell you to call the IRS and reference that error code. There are a lot of different reasons you might get an error when you try to submit the online application. In my experience, the most common reason this happens has to do with the business's name. If somebody else applied for an EIN with the same business name, the IRS's system doesn't know how to handle that, and it'll kind of freak out and give you that error. Now, that doesn't mean you need to go freaking out right away. That doesn't necessarily mean you can't use that business name or that it's already trademarked or anything like that. The IRS doesn't care about trademarks. They're not going to tell you if the business name isn't available. It just means they already have an EIN associated with that name, and because of that, the online application won't work. But that may be a good reason to search the USPTO's database or have an attorney perform a trademark clearance search just to make sure you aren't potentially infringing on another business's trademark. But anyway, if you get an error when you try to submit the application online, then you'll probably just be better off submitting the paper form via fax or mail, rather than calling the IRS and waiting on hold. You'll also have to submit it by fax or mail if you don't have a social security number or if you or your business aren't located in the United States. The online application requires a social security number for the responsible party, who will be the IRS's kind of primary contact regarding the EIN. And it only allows you to enter an address that's located in the United States. So if you don't have one or both of them, then you won't be able to use the online application. If you fax the application and provide your own fax number, then the IRS will usually reply within a few days with confirmation of your EIN. Their website says typically 4 days, but it sometimes takes a bit longer. If you're not a lawyer, tax professional, or 90-year-old who still has a fax machine, then you can send the SS4 form by mail. The cover page of this form will give you the fax number and the address that you can send it to, depending on where you're located. If you submit the form by mail, or if you fax it and don't have a return fax number, then the IRS will mail you the EIN confirmation letter, typically within about 4 weeks. Again, that's what their website says, but it's not uncommon for it to take a little bit longer than that. Lastly, international applicants who don't have an address or location in the United States, you guys can also apply for the EIN by phone. As I mentioned earlier, I'm going to make a special members-only how-to video to go along with this one. In that video, I'll walk you guys through both the online application and the SS4 form and show you exactly how to fill it out. So if you are confused about how to fill out the online application or the paper form, make sure you check out my channel memberships for access to that members-only how-to video. Of course, if you have trouble with either or you're not sure how to properly complete the application, it's always best to consult with a lawyer or a tax professional for more help though. So let's say you've done all that and you have the EIN, then something in your business changes. Do you need to get a new EIN? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. If you operate as a sole proprietorship and you do have an EIN already, you'll need to apply for a new one if you're subject to bankruptcy proceedings, if you incorporate the business, if you take on business partners, or if you purchase or inherit an existing business that you operate as a sole proprietorship. But you won't need a new EIN if you change the business's name or DBA, if you change your location or add other locations, or if you start or operate multiple businesses as a sole proprietorship. If you've been operating as a single member LLC and you don't already have an EIN for the LLC, and then you elect to be taxed as a C Corp or S Corp, then usually you will need to apply for a new EIN in that instance. However, this isn't usually the case for existing LLCs that already have an EIN. In that case, you typically won't need a new EIN just because you decide to elect to be taxed as a corporation. These are just a few examples of when you might need a new EIN. There are certainly other situations when you may need a new one, but these are just some of the more common reasons you might wonder, do I need a new EIN? Generally speaking, for most businesses, whether it's a sole proprietorship, partnership, corporation, or LLC, you won't need a new EIN if you change the business name, move the business to a new location, or add locations. Those things don't really affect your federal tax status, so the IRS doesn't really care. It's usually only if the change has some effect on the business's federal tax status that you might need a new EIN. As always, with anything having to do with your business or taxes especially, it is best to consult with a lawyer or tax professional to determine the proper way to handle it. Every situation is different, and the rules don't always apply exactly the same to everybody. That's all for this episode, folks. Drop a comment below. Let me know what you think. And again, don't forget to check the description for links to additional information and resources, including a link directly to the IRS's online application. Finally, be sure to check out my channel memberships if you want access to that special members-only how-to video where I will walk you through exactly how to complete and submit the online application and the paper SS4 form. There's a link to the membership page down in the video description, or you can check the membership tab on my channel page. Thank you all so much for watching. I'm Aiden Durham, and I'll see you next time.